In the previous video, we started to talk about the different kinds of settings for the wheel section windows. We looked at this particular button, right? It's called window settings. Right? This dialog box is going to allow you to configure the look and feel of this wheel section window, right? And many of the dialog boxes, items in the dialog boxes are kind of duplicated by the buttons on the ribbon for this particular text-sensitive, context-sensitive menu item, right? And then lots of the buttons in the window or wheel section ribbon is also duplicated, in this toolbar. And this wheel section window dialog box allows you to do lots of the things that you can do through those buttons. And it also provides you some capability for flattening, right? You can flatten on wheel tops, on depths, right? And on multiple wheel depth tops, right? That kind of thing. So in the last video, I wasn't able to actually get this thing working, but looks like I can get to work now. So all you have to do is to actually select the wheel tops, and then use this arrow to point it in there, right? And then when you are trying to flatten on multiple wheel tops, it's gonna try to. It's gonna so when you try to flatten on multiple wheel tops, the scale on each of the wheel is gonna be different, right? For now, all the scale is kind of fixed. It's 1 to 3,000 on every wheel, right? But once you actually flatten on multiple wheel tops, the scale on different wheel is gonna be different. So Petrel is gonna need a reference wheel, right? It's gonna need a wheel that's kind of and the depth track on that particular wheel is gonna be kind of correct, right? It's gonna be fixed, not correct. It's gonna be true. All right. So you need a reference wheel. Suppose we use A16 as the reference wheel. Then all we have to do is to actually go to the wheels folder, and then select A16 as the reference wheel, and then point it into the first dialog box. And then at this point, if you click on apply, then it's going to be flattened on all wheel tops, right? So every wheel top now appears like a flat line. But if you pay attention to the scale, the A16 scale is still in kind of a black fonts, right? But if you look at B9 and C3, the index track, the depth track, the numbers in the depth track are all grayed out, right? So this A16 is gonna still have the true depth, but for B9 and C3, they are referenced depths, right? They are not exactly true vertical depths anymore. It's a referenced depths. But let's still go back to flatten on wheel top, and then choose base cretaceous as the flattening depth, right? And now it goes back to the usual case, right? So all black bonds. And this Windows, this settings box for dialog box for the wheel section window also allows you to, for example, set the horizontal scaling, right? Which is kind of similar to these two dialog boxes, to these two boxes here, right? Horizontal scaling. That's in the layout tab. And then it also allows you to set up the paper if you try to have a hard copy for the wheel section windows that you have been working on. If you want to print it out, either to a PDF file or to a physical printer, kind of thing. And that's the settings dialog box for wheel sections. For the wheel section window, and then underneath the definitions tab, it has a link to the X section settings. X section settings. This button is kind of similar to this button here, or to this button here, right? It's gonna give you the cross section settings dialog box. If you click on it, and then it's gonna allow you to configure the cross section here. That's the data object. Maybe I should just close this window first. Right. And in this particular dialog box, you can configure, for example, the wheels. If you want to add more wheels into it, this arrow allows you to do that. If you want to rearrange the ordering of the different wheels, these buttons will allow you to do that. Right? It's going to allow you to move up and down the wheels, to change the ordering of the wheels. Again, all these things are kind of underneath the definition tab. Right? And in the last video, I mentioned that if you click on the default wheel fan settings, then all the settings are going to be for the default setting that's going to be applied automatically to every wheel. Right? If you add new wheels into this wheel section, then the default setting is going to be applied to the newly added wheel and its logs also. Right? But if you want to sort of use different templates for different wheels, then you have to sort of select the particular wheel that you want to configure, and then uncheck the use default, and then select the template that you want to use. Right. So, but here I'll just stick with default. And for default setting, for default wheel fan settings, you have a choice for templates, right? What's going to be the default template that's going to be applied for every wheel that you're going to sort of add to the section, right? And then you have a button that gives you the template settings dialog box, right? And this button is actually identical to this template settings button here, and also to the template setting box here. So this is creating a new template. But you should also have you're right, that's the template settings, right? So you have 3 occurrences of the same button here inside of the cross-section settings dialog box. The settings dialog box for the cross-section here, right? You have a link to that template setting, and then on the toolbar, right? And then on the ribbon, right? So if you click on this button, it's going to open the settings dialog box for the template. And for now, the template is the new template that we created, right? It's gm_perm_porosity, right? And in this dialog box, we can control how the logs are going to be displayed for all the wheels that use the default template. In the last video, we started to look at this particular dialog box, right? We have noticed that we've got objects that's kind of organized in different sort of levels, right? So on the top, you have vertical tracks, and then you have multiple, the so-called tracks inside of it. One track is actually, for example, the index track, right? The index track is, for example, the SSTVD column here, right? And then the gamma track is going to be the gamma. It's going to be the entire column for configuring for displaying the gamma ray measurement, right? And then the perm is going to be the perm track, right? So you have for every this kind of track, you have 2 levels of data. The track itself, right? So underneath the perm track, you have info, style, and a curve filling, right? Later on, we're going to look at the curve filling in more detail. This curve filling is actually very, very important. And this curve filling is actually a property that's associated with the track, right? But underneath the track, you have the curve. So for example, if you click on perm here, right? That's the curve. That's the curve object that's inside of the perm track, right? And this curve is called perm. And for every track, you can display more than one curve, actually. And later on, we're going to look at this kind of capability. It doesn't have to be just one curve. One track can display multiple curves, basically. Right? And for each curve, you also have info tab, definition tab. You have a limits tab, right? it's gonna control the range, and then you have a style, how the curve is gonna be displayed, right? The style tab is probably more relevant to us, right? If we want to sort of display the curves in different ways, right? And then you have borehole markers that allows you to control the display of the wheel tops, and then background. The background is basically the stuff that's going to be displayed in those gaps between those wheel logs, between those wheels, and depending upon the object that you have selected. So if I put my cursor here at the top vertical tracks, if I click on this button, add a new object, then it's going to allow me to add different kinds of objects that's kind of on the same level as track, right? So I have multiple tracks, right? I have multiple tracks. If I click on this, then it's going to allow me to add things that's kind of similar to track. I can also add new tracks, index track, tadpole track. A tadpole track is basically just something that you use for displaying the dip and the azimuth of the beddings. If you have so the tadpole is basically just a object that's that with a circular head and then a tail, right? And the location of that circular head is going to tell you the depth and then also the dip angle, right? And then the direction of the tail is going to tell you the azimuth of the bedding. Comment track is somehow useful because sometimes you want to add some comments or text to explain what the track is for. Or for example, to add some comments about the logs and the wheel tops, then you may have changes, right? Summation track, polar frequency plot track. If you are doing fractures, right? Those kind of Rose diagram thing that can be added as a separate track, that kind of thing. So depending upon which one you actually click, so it's going to display different things. Suppose I click on background and then I click on this thing, then it's going to allow me to add more objects underneath the background, right? For example, seismic. If I want to display seismic data between those wheels, right? Just to show the kind of correlation between the seismic arrivals and the horizons, for example, the horizons picked in the wheel tops. Maybe I want to display the seismic data together with the wheel logs, right? So I can fill up those gaps with seismic data if I want to add seismic data. And property, right? Once we have populated our three-dimensional model with geophysical properties, right? We can add that. We can add that, right? As a background displayed between the logs. Simulation property, 3D geometry, that kind of thing, right? So depending upon where you click, it's going to display different things. It's going to allow you, for example, add surface groups, grid horizontal contacts, wheel tops. For now we have one wheel top underneath borehole markers, right? If we have multiple wheel tops, we can add them underneath the borehole markers, right? So this button with something that looks like an explosion, yellow star, this kind of thing, allows you to add new objects. You're going to see this kind of button not just in this particular dialog box, but also in other kinds of dialog boxes. It's going to allow you to add new stuff or create new objects, right? And it's context aware. So depending upon the thing that you have selected, it's going to allow you to create different kinds of objects, right? But now let's look at the tracks, the different objects, the different tracks underneath the vertical tracks object, right? So for example, we have index track. The index track is basically just this depth SSTVD vertical depth thing, right? And you can actually configure how this index track is going to be displayed inside of this particular pane, right? For now, it's automatic, and the automatic value actually is our preferred value SSTVD, right? But if you want to specify values, for example, you can just click on specified, And then you can select from a range of choices, MD, for example, right? And then click on apply, then it's going to display MD instead of SSTVD, right? Let's still get back to SSTVD. If we click on apply, it's going to go back to SSTVD. And then width is going to control the width of the track. So specified for now, it's like 10 millimeters, right? Suppose you want a very thick index track, you can change it for like 20, and then if you click on apply, then you're gonna get a very thick index track, right? But maybe it's not a good idea to change it. Let's still change it back to 10, right? Font size, right? Font size, that's gonna control the size of the numbers that's displayed inside of the index track. And then style, tick marks. And for now, the default value is gonna display at the left, right? On the right, the tick marks are displayed on the right. And the annotations, you can control the angle, for example. If you don't want it to be like look like a horizontal thing, horizontal number. If you want the numbers to be displayed like a vertical, that kind of thing, you can change the angle, right? Or you can change it to up and down, that kind of thing. The annotation, flattening. Flattening is kind of associated with how the numbers are going to be sort of shifted, basically. So for now, the flattening is on base criterion, right? The flattening is on the base criterion, right? But suppose we want to change our depth track so that base criterion is going to have depth of 0, right? So if that's the case, if that's what you want, you can sort of uncheck the auto and then click on relative. And then if you click on apply, you're going to see that the base criterion is going to have a depth of 0, and everything else is kind of relative to that, right? So you have negative numbers at shallow depths and sort of smaller positive numbers at larger depths, right? But let's still go back to auto. Maybe then auto, right? Then it's going back to the absolute values. You can also control the increment, number of minor ticks, those things. Those are the styling, right? Styling controls allows you sort of to configure for the depth track, right? So for the index track, the settings is relatively straightforward. It's not too complicated, right? And if you want to sort of rearrange the ordering of the different tracks, for example, if I wanted the index track to appear on the right side of every other logs, for example, right? You can select the index track and then just use these two arrows to move it up and down, right? So suppose I move the index track to between gamma and perm. If I click on apply, then the index track is going to be between gamma and perm, and that's going to happen for every wheel, right? For every wheel that you're actually looking at, right? And you can move it down further. Right, so now index track is going to be displayed as the last track, as the rightmost track, right? As the rightmost track, right? And because you selected all the starting as auto, right? Or starting as auto, the tick mark now appears at the left, right? When the depth track was on the left hand side, the tick mark was on the right, actually. So this is all the some automatic configuration that's done for you. So let's still move it back to the left, right? And so the index track is relatively simple to configure, right? So let's look at a ordinary log track, a track that's used for displaying a log, right? So here you have here I have selected the permeability track, right? So it's the track object. The track object itself has an info, style, and curve filling, right? So let's look at the info. Not really that many to see if I do specified. But if I do styling, click on styling. So this styling is going to allow me to control, for example, the width of the track. For now, it's 25 millimeter, right? Suppose I want a very thick perm track, say 50, right? And then the permeability track is going to have a larger width than the other two tracks, right? It still can change it to like 25. Grid lines, automatic. For now, it's automatic, right? But you can choose, right? Whether it's linear or going to be logarithmic, right? Suppose I choose logarithmic, right? Oh, for now it's actually logarithmic, right? The automatic one is actually logarithmic for permeability. Yeah, permeability is actually better to display as. If you choose it as a linear, you won't be able to see the kind of variations in it, right? Because the perm actually has a very large variation, right? And for permeability, it's actually better to use the logarithmic scale, right? And grid lines, geovertical lines, those are vertical lines, right? If you uncheck it, it's not going to give you the vertical grid lines, right? And then horizontal major lines, if you uncheck it and apply, then those horizontal lines are going to disappear. Horizontal grid lines are going to disappear, right? So let's still put them back on, right? And then do we want the horizontal minor lines? That's going to give you a finer grid, right? And then you can also specify the color and the width of those lines, right? And then background for now it's white, right? But you can select any kind of color that you would like to use. For example, gray, right? Then it's gonna give you a gray background. Oh. Right. Show value readout. So value label, it's not really doing anything, but let me still apply it. Right? And then let's try to sort of look at the curve filling, right? Look at the curve filling. So suppose we want to not just looking at the curves, but we want to fill up the curves with some kind of meaning, right? And then it's gonna give you a visual cue about possible phases, right? The possible lithology, that kind of thing. So before we actually do a curve filling, we have to sort of create a new color fill object. We have to click on this thing, right? So it actually allows you to actually create multiple color fields. You can have different color fill strategies or different color fill plans, right? Suppose for each of the different color fill, you can have a different setting, right? But now let's do just one. Right? If you want to insert more, you just click on this thing. But if you want to delete them, you just click on this button, right? So now you got one color view, and um, and then you can choose, right? So depth interval, so the region where you want to sort of apply the color fill, right? So default is from top of the wheel to bottom of the wheel, so it's gonna fill up the entire wheel log, right? But you can choose. You don't have to sort of. For example, you can specify a measured depth, and then it's gonna allow you to specify the starting measured depth, right? And so suppose you sort of specify MD, then it's gonna allow you to specify depth, right? But usually it's just to do top of wheel, right? And then fill edge. So fill edge means what? Fill edge means from which curve to which curve, right? Usually it's from the track edge. It's actually the left edge. It's going to use the left edge to the curve, to permeability. Suppose we just click on apply. Let's look at the default behavior, right? Then it's going to fill from the left edge of the permeability track to the permeability curve, right? Fill up with whatever color that you have selected, right? And later on, we're going to look at other kind of choices. For example, it allows you to actually fill from a level to a curve, right? Or from a curve to a curve. And then for the same is true for the tool part, right? You can fill it to a particular level, right? To a curve or to a track edge. So these two things allows you to actually come up with a very different looking color field. Transparency for now it's none, right? But you can give it some kind of transparency, say 60% or something, right? That's gonna give you some kind of transparency, right? But let's still put it as none because we want to see the. And then fill color. For fill color you have many different choices, right? Um, um, so default is going to be selected. If you choose selected, then it's going to allow you to select the color. Suppose we change it to red, right? And then the curve filling is going to be changed from yellow to red, right? The color is all changed to red, right? And then if you want to sort of use a property as a color, for example, if I want to use a gamma ray as the color, right? So what's going to happen, right? What's going to happen? So it's going to go from the left edge to the curve, right? But the color is going to show the value of the gamma ray, right? So here you sort of see a red patch here, right? Right. The reason that you see red patch here is because red means what? Red means high. So if you look at the color bar here, right? Red is on the right hand side, right? That means a very high value, right? So if you see a red patch here, which means the gamma ray at this particular location is very high, right? The same is true yellow, right? And then gamma ray actually, the color actually gives you an indication about the gamma ray at this particular location, right? At different depths. I mean, at different depths, right? So so you can choose as a property, right? And then you can also specify a pattern. Let's so the pattern is going to be so suppose we choose all the dots and then change the color of the dots to black, right? And then it's going to give you all those dots inside of the field, right? But let's not use a pattern for this particular track. Later on we're going to use patterns, right? And then field color. You also have something that's called a field color negative, right? So for now, and the default value is no color. It's just the background, right? So the negative part is going to be the part that goes from the curve to the right side of the edge. So suppose I give it some color as property, for example, right? And then if I do apply, this setting is not going to work because but we're going to look at this particular setting when we put two curves into one track. For now, the example that I'm looking at, perm has only just one tracking it. So let's not look at this one yet, right? But later on, let's look at how do we actually use this part to actually display something meaningful. So field edge, let's come back to this part, right? Field edge. from edge track edge to curve, right? Suppose you change it to like level. Suppose you change it to level, and then it's gonna allow you to specify a level, right? So maybe let's give it like a 100 or something. Let's see if there's any kind of a difference. Oh, maybe not 100. Right. So now the color field is just gonna fill up from the level of 100 to the curve. See, and in the window, let me see if I can. Let me close this window for now, and see if I can actually drag this curve. Oh, I can't drag this. The thing is that I probably have to sort of enable this tool palette, and then click on curve fill window mode, right? And then I can drag it, right? If I drag it, then it's gonna display the curve, the filling from a lower level to the curve, right? So can I can use this level to control which part of the log I want to display, right? I want to sort of fill up with color, right? So and as I actually shift this kind of vertical curve in one wheel, all the other wheels are going to change in sync. So it's not just changing this one track of one wheel. It's going to actually change all the permeability tracks in all the wheels. Right? Let me close back this one, and let me get back my template settings. And that's controlling the curve filling inside of the template, inside the template settings dialog box. And I was just showing you that there's also if you sort of enable this thing, click on this X section editing sort of tool palette thing with a kind of toolbox on the icon, then you're gonna get this thing, right? And then curve it. If you want to sort of change the color field, then this button allows you to interact with the logs, right? When you click on this curve fill button, and then you can drag those curves back and forth, right? So now for the level is now at like a 57 or something. Let me change it to like an integer. Change it to like 60 or something. And when I have multiple curves, when I have multiple curves in one track, I should be able to fill from curve to curve. Right? But the permeability is probably not a good example for us to do that. Now let's look at the porosity, right? Let's look at the porosity. For porosity track, you have a similar kind of a style setting and also curve filling settings, right? But suppose I want to display the porosity curve. So if I click on the porosity curve object, the curve object that's displayed in the porosity track, right? It will also give you the info, definition, limits, and style, right? And here you can control how the line is going to be displayed. Right. Let's change some properties of porosity. For example, suppose I want to change the color of the curve with it. Right. For now, it's displayed as black. Right. I can sort of click on this thing, right? And then if I choose specified, for example, and then click on apply, you can sort of see all the curves are being sort of changed to this kind of yellowish green color, right? Oh, it automatically filled up the curve. Oh, I must click on something. Let me go back to the track, and then curve filling. Let me delete it. Let me delete this one. And then apply. What I was trying to show you is actually how to actually change the color of the curve, basically. Right. So if I click on the curve object, it's going to give me info, definition, limits, and a style, right? And in the style, the default is black, right? If you change it to black, apply, then that's going to be black, right? But if you actually change it to like a specified, you click on apply, then it's going to give you some kind of color that's yellowish green, right? But where do you actually specify this value, specify this color? Right? You have to sort of go to the porosity property underneath the wheels, right? The porosity wheel, the porosity log underneath the global wheel logs, right? And then double click on it. And then inside of the info tab, it's gonna have a color, right? Here you can sort of select a different color. For example, I want to display it as red, right? If you apply, then everything is going to be displayed as red, right? The porosity curve is going to be displayed as red, right? That's when you actually choose specified for color, right? Suppose you choose selected, right? Apply. Oh, I think the default color is probably the selected color is probably white, right? You don't want the white thing. You want to let's choose a blue, right? Let's choose a blue color. So if you choose selected, then this draw down menu is going to work, and here it's going to allow you to select the color and then apply. Then the porosity curve is going to be displayed as blue, right? As property, z value is black, and let's still go back to black, right? So black seems to be a universal color that looks good, right? And also you can sort of display the points on the curve. If you select the show, then it's going to display not just as a curve, it's going to display all the points on the curve, right? And those points are going to be at the location of the sample, right? Usually it's 1 meter per sample or something, or 1 meter per 8 samples, or I don't know, you guys remember, but if you want to see all the points, all the sampling points, you can enable the points, right? And then it allows you to point size, to configure the size of the points, right? For example, if you want a smaller size number, say 2, right? It's going to give you smaller circles. And then symbol doesn't have to be circle, it can be some other thing, some other symbols, right? But let's turn it off. Let's still display it as curve. And the definitions tab. The definitions tab allows you to specify other suppose you have multiple measurements of porosity, right? It's not just a one porosity log. You have multiple porosity logs. For gamma, you may have multiple gamma curves, right? You can actually select them. You can actually select them from the global wheel logs, and then just use this blue arrow to point them into this box, right? And then they can be displayed together with porosity inside of the porosity track, right? But you have to make sure that those curves also use the porosity template, right? The template is kind of identical. Of course, you can, when you have multiple ones, you can delete some of them using this button. Limits, you can play this thing, play around. It's not really that difficult to configure, but let's not get into that right now. So that's the curve. That's the curve object. How you can actually configure the curve, right? Sometimes we would like to actually display multiple curves in one track, right? So suppose I want to display gamma and porosity together, right? So one of the ways for doing that is just to drag. Use your mouse and hold down the left key and then drag it into the gamma track. Right? Now it becomes porosity gamma track. It's not just a gamma track anymore. It's a porosity gamma track. Right? Suppose suppose you want to change the order of the two curves. You can select one of them and then just use this arrow to switch them, right? So now the name of the track has changed from to gamma porosity, right? Instead of porosity gamma. And again, you can sort of choose different curve objects and change their look and feel, right? Change their style. But if you go back to the gamma porosity track object, if you go to the track object instead of the curve object, the curve filling now allows you to before we actually do the curve filling, let's do an apply first, so that the porosity is displayed together with gamma, right? And now we can sort of try to do a color fill. For some reason, the line looks slightly thicker. For some reason, I don't really know. Maybe my display is changing something. Suppose you want to change the thickness of the line, right? You can still go to the style tab for the curve object, and then you have an option that's called line width, right? For now it's 1, but if you want to make it thicker, for example 3, right? Apply. Then the gamma curve is going to become thicker. Right? But let's still go back to 1. Still go back to 1. 1 is like the minimum, right? And then line type, block type. Line type, you can choose, is it going to be a solid line or is it going to be kind of a dotted line? Block type, start, middle, end. So basically, it's just to change the thickness of the horizontal lines here. The two horizontal lines. But let's still put it back to none. But let's still go back to the gamma porosity curve track object and see if we can come up with a meaningful color view, curve view. Right? So first we add a new color view object, right? And then the depth interval from the top of the wheel to the bottom of the wheel. And the fill edge. So now we don't want to sort of from the track to the track edge anymore. We want to fill from curve to curve, basically. Right. So the from curve is supposed to be the curve that's on the left side, right? So if I choose porosity, because usually when gamma is large, porosity is low. So it's gonna from the porosity curve to the gamma curve, right? And the transparency is none. Fill style. So if the porosity is low, gamma is high, then it might be an indication of shear, right? So if that's the case, I don't want to use a yellow color. I want to use some kind of color that's kind of indicative of shear. I use a shallower gray, right? And I can sort of use a pattern. What kind of pattern might be indicative of shear? Maybe this one. And then the color of the pattern, right? If the pattern has the same color as the fill color, then you won't be able to see the pattern. So let's make the pattern sort of darker, just black. Maybe the color difference is not so big. So maybe I should change the fill color to a lighter gray in this one, right? And at this point, if we click on apply, then it's going to fill up the curve, fill up the gap between the porosity curve and the gamma curve, right? And fill style negative. Negative means that for now the region that has been filled up is a small porosity and a large gamma, right? So that's from porosity to gamma, right? But in some cases you have large porosity and a small gamma, right? And the kind of color for that region, the color and pattern for those kind of regions, when you have large porosity and small gamma, that kind of situation, that's going to be controlled by this part of the box, right? Suppose the negative part indicates sand. So let's select a color for sand. Maybe let's use yellow. Maybe this kind of bright yellow, and then let's use some. Maybe this is a good for the dots. Okay, make it black. Right. And now if we click on apply, right, then it's gonna fill up the regions where you have large porosity and a small gamma with the color and pattern that you have selected here. Right. And that might be indicative of the locations of the shell and the locations of the sand. Right. And in fact, it looks like the color field actually has a good correlation with the whale tops, right? So the whale tops, the location of the whale tops are actually kind of correlated with the edges of the different color fields, right? So let me close this window. For some reason, it's let me close this window. Oh, do I need to close it? So by just dragging one curve into a track, you can sort of put multiple curves together, right? But another way of doing that is actually when you try to add the curves. When you try to add the curves, add the log curves to the wheel section window, right? So if you right click on porosity, right? Click on add to global template, right? Vertical, and then here you can sort of select if you want to add it to a new track, or you want to add it to some existing track, for example, right? Perm track, a gamma porosity track, an empty track. Here I have an empty track. The reason I have an empty track is because I moved the porosity, which was originally in its own track. I moved the porosity into that gamma porosity track, so that's why it has an empty track now, right? But if I click on, let me still go back to template settings. I have an empty track. That's track here, right? Suppose I want to delete this particular track, I can just click on this button to delete it. So now I have just the gamma porosity track and a perm track, right? And then if I go back to say net gross, if I click on net gross and then add to global template, vertical. Oh, I didn't click on apply. Click on apply. Right. Now if I click on net gross, add to global template, vertical. Now you have in a new track or gamma porosity track or perm track, right? Supposing a new track, let's put it into a maybe let's try put it into a perm track. Oh, no, it's not gonna work because the scale is kind of very different, right? The scale is very different, so you won't be able to see for permeability. The scale is like log scale. It's but for net gross, it's like a linear scale. It's not gonna work. So if you want to put net gross into a new track, you can just say let's create a new track. Let's go back to the vertical track and then click on this exploding star, and then a new track, right? So now we should have a new track now, right? And then we can just move net gross over there. Right. So now net gross is in its own track, and the track is renamed to net gross. If we click on apply, then it's going to give us a separate track that's net gross, right? And inside this template settings, you also have a button that's boho markers. And for now, we have the whale top plane A that's inside of it, right? So if we click on plane A, it's going to give us info, definition tab, and then symbols and labels. Right? And the symbols and labels has lots of things that you can sort of tweak by yourself. But one of the boxes that's not checked is this thing called show color field at zone level. Right? If you click on this and then click on apply, then it's gonna fill up the region that's between neighboring whale tops with a solid color. And sometimes your whale tops may have multiple levels, right? You have large horizons and then smaller horizons. That's kind of in between large horizons. If you have multiple levels, you can sort of choose show color field at zone level. For now, it's max, right? But you can select multiple levels, right? And then it's gonna fill up the whale tops just for that particular level. Yeah, I think that's this particular template settings, right? And the template settings allows us to look at to change how the logs are displayed inside of each whale, right? And it's gonna control the look and the feel of the whales, right? And this is for C3 to A16, right? If I switch to a different cross section, then the same template. If I choose the same template, gr perm pour, it's supposed to give us the same kind of setting for the template, right? But for some reason, the base Cretaceous is not lined up. Is not flattened. That's inside of the window setting, right? So inside of the window setting, I should flatten on whale top and then choose base Cretaceous. And now it's supposed to give us this the same kind of color field pattern for this new cross section, for this different whale section. Okay, that's for this video.